Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in for what we call jokingly and lovingly the Sunday Sermon. Now, this is usually happening in our supporter community on the platform Locals, but today I wanted to come on and do it for all of our audience. And what I'm going to share with you today, I'm going to base on a premise. Now, I can't prove this premise, but it seems to be pretty accurate. The premise is that out of the entire population in the world, there's about 10% of the people who live and create consciously. Roughly half of those 10% are incredibly dark and evil. And we have seen quite a lot of those forces and how they've been operating. 5%, the other half of those 10% that live consciously, are inherently and really, really good people, which means that they don't just live consciously, but they live by a high moral standard. They have incredibly high values and usually are spiritually very mature. So what is with the rest of the population, the 90%? Without wanting to sound condescending, you could say that 90% of the people live unconsciously or by program only, which means they don't have much of creative thinking or a real creative direction or vision for their lives or for anything beyond their lives for that matter, for example, for their community or the world. That doesn't make them bad or doesn't make them good. It makes them more or less followers. So in reality, where we are today, in my perception anyways, is that the 5% of really, really good people, if you want to put it that way, and the 5% of really, really evil people or entities in this realm are competing over who is going to lead the 90%. Now, among those in the 90%, I think there's quite many who have the potential to awaken to real thought, the potential to awaken to real creation and to live consciously. Now, that is possible, I'm certain. What I want to talk about is the 5% that are good, that have actually vision power, creative power, that are consciously creating a good life for themselves, or at least have the potential to do so. And what I have been observing over the years of being in the truth and freedom community, among those 5%, most people are really focused on their spiritual journey, on their awareness and consciousness journey, which is the basis for everything else, of course. But what is sort of stands out is very few, comparatively, are willing or actually dive deep into the intricacies and the mechanisms of the construct, the world that they live in, political systems, societal systems, science, and whatnot. And so what has happened, for example, in 2020, which was so obvious and shocking to observe, that among those very good people, very many absolutely fell for the rhetoric, the narrative, the fear, the worry, and complied almost in a hypnotized way with the mandates and the requests and the demands by the other 5% who ran this entire show, right? The 5% of very dark and evil and inverted consciousness people. So what has been our work for the past 15, 20 years, if you will, is to merge sort of the thought that the inner exploration must be applied practically in the world out there, and that good people, really, really good people who have an impeccable moral standard and who don't who are never willing to compromise that standard, actually step into some of the truths and the necessary things that need to be done in this construct, right? And this has been a pretty steep and a pretty challenging path, because most people that are on this path sort of go, this world is weird and I don't really want to know about these things. And if I don't put my energy there, it's not happening. But the problem is that what you don't know sort of sneaks up on you. And so often people are, unbeknownst to them, complying with a dark agenda. On the contrary, on the other side of that coin, the 5% who what I call incredibly evil and dark, maybe beyond help, they are incredibly organized because their sole focus in life is to exercise the power and to gain more of it, and to control others around them, control systems as much as they can. That's their sole goal in life, because that's how they feed sort of their self-importance, how they feed their very dark spiritual needs. So you have this force that is highly organized and has been organized and is using any and all means to achieve their goals. And then you have the 5% of very good people who are, of course, bound to a moral compass, who are not willing to compromise that, but who so often are not really stepping up to the calling and stepping up and stepping into the true purpose. And this is, if you think about it, this is really what we are inspired and intending to accomplish, is to help people wake up not just to truths and not just wake up to the reality that we find ourselves in, but to wake up to their calling. Because here's the thing, there's not a single person watching this right now or listening to this who does not have a calling. Now, you might think of a calling as something that someone else, maybe God or some higher being, has created for you. I think of calling as something that your own spirit calls you to do, that you set out to do or set out to be, that you feel strongly about. And I haven't met a single person who was willing to answer the call and start taking steps in that direction who hasn't succeeded. And what is succeeding? It's simply meaning that today you're getting one step closer, or today you're becoming a little bit better than you were yesterday. That's what success means. But what I see within our community, although it's become a lot better, is sort of still looking and hoping that among the 5% of the dark side who've been running the show, by the way, that's what they were so good at. They were so good at convincing the other 5% that they shouldn't get involved, that it's unspiritual to do it, that, the devil doesn't exist, darkness doesn't really exist, it's all a figment of our imagination, and that focusing on that would sort of steer them away from their spiritual path. What a great strategy, right? What a great strategy to instill this belief in very good people that taking strong action is actually a bad thing. And so, we and not just here at Inspired, but all over the place, there's many good people who are realizing that we will not accomplish something or triumph, and that's what we set out to do, to triumph, if only a few loud voices or visible people are sort of giving the impulses. It is each and every one. But I think it is very important that people actually listen to what it is that they're called to do, because it might not be something that is visible to the world or something, that is sort of on the world stage. A calling or purpose, if you will, to me is a number of small things that accumulate to something meaningful, to accumulate into something quite visible and big. But we got to take those small steps. And for some people, that means they're called to take a leadership position in their community. For others, it means that they're called to sharpen their skills in a certain area and offer those skills to people who need them. There are so many things. What our community has gone through is a pacification process and a process of being sort of domesticated and made very passive. Those were the psyops of the last 10, 15 years that are very effective. And this belief that, the entire population relies on one or a few external leaders, big people in high positions, and that they are the ones who should do those things. My perception has always been that grassroots is where it's always at. And 5% of the population, if fully actualized, fully activated, fully empowered, stepping into their calling, if that happens, the other 5% who has been running the show has no chance, because they're so inverted in their consciousness, they're so far away, they're so entrapped in their own darkness, that they cannot access those spirit powers, if you will, those co-creative powers, those imaginative powers, the vision powers. They can't. They rely on projecting those things onto us, right? And our imagination, our vision power, if they can capture it, they use that for their own purposes. That's how this has been going on. That's why they put out these movies and these shows and the entertainment and the mainstream media and all of that. Now, just by watching it, you're not automatically participating in it. Sometimes observing it and watching it teaches you a lot about where their strategy is going. It's the people that really feed off of those pieces of content, if you will, of those books, of those movies, that allow for fear to creep in, that are becoming slowly the accelerators of those visions, ironically enough. So while our community, if you want to call it that, or our 5%, if you want to call it that, has become, over the years spiritually more mature, there's a level of street smart and sort of street wisdom, if you will, that we're still lacking, right? We're as a collective incredibly naive and easy to impress. And so a lot of people are falling for rhetoric and big words and social media campaigns. And I don't blame anyone, because it's all a learning curve. Everybody's on a learning curve. We all are in a process of awakening. Nobody is awakened. We are awakening, right? But it is really time that we sort of shed the naivete and go from this sort of childhood thinking into a fully mature and adult creator, which is never naive, which can see the opposition, can see the enemy, which they still are, and act accordingly, right? And not act in a childish manner. And make up stories like, if we just don't pay attention, that's not going to happen, because then, where energy flows, where attention goes. And those are sort of, they're platitudes that contain a pure core of truth, but what is spun around them isn't true. Just because we're looking at something doesn't make it more of it, right? I mean, if that were the truth, I've said this a million times, if non-attention, simply not paying attention to something, takes the energy of that, and that then starts going away, then slavery, child trafficking, human trafficking, sexual exploitation, those things have only grown over time, although the general population at large was completely unaware, which means no attention. It was able to actually flourish because of no attention, right? So this premise and these spiritual principles that are being broken down and where a lot of the truth is lost simply don't hold true when you actually scrutinize them. And so in this realm, in this construct, our first and foremost duty, if you will, or purpose is to balance ourselves, to ground ourselves, to remove ourselves from the shackles of the program that is very strong. And once we do, we attain a certain level of freedom that is unthinkable to the 90%. Now, what do we do with that freedom? Well, first and foremost, intention, vision power, right? What we create in our minds, what we really envision and put feelings into, yes. But then we have to start moving in that direction and take tangible steps. And at certain points, we also have to accept the battle that in some areas we will encounter and that we might have to even fight. Sometimes that's on a spiritual level, sometimes that's on a physical level. I've never sought a battle, but I've never shied away from one when it, when sort of came my way. But the truth is that we have to mature. We have to be adults in this and start applying ourselves accordingly. The world is in a precarious situation where an incredibly evil and dark plan is supposed to be fulfilled to a large degree by the year 2030. That still holds true. That's not a fairy tale. That's documented. And the combined power of non-government organizations and governments and corporations and dark spiritual powers steering it all from the background, those combined efforts are still moving in that direction. And our combined intentions, energies, and actions cannot just counter those plans, but actually make them absolutely obsolete. We can take that leadership position for the 90% and help them in the process to wake up to their own true creative power. That is possible. but we haven't really achieved that kind of coherence yet. And I'm not talking about building huge organizations that sort of always run the same course. It's built from a great intention, but then the organization lives for itself and for its own survival and its own whatever. It's more a maturation and connection on an invisible level, right? Where we are bound by our shared intentions, bound by our shared vision, but we're all over the place. We're spread out, which is a good thing. That is the calling of the day. And what I'm asking humbly, very humbly, is that you listen to what has been in your heart, maybe all your life. Maybe you've been hearing it, quietly. Maybe it's becoming louder. Maybe it's becoming very clear. And all I'm asking is for you to take one step each day in that direction of what is in your heart as a calling. I would venture to say that if it is in your heart and has been for a long time, it is impossible for you to not be able to achieve it. So if something is so deeply in you, maybe you were born with it, then there is always a path for you to live that and achieve that. But you have to apply your full self to it and not let fear and worry and doubt guide you. And that is when life changes. That is the stepping out of the cocoon and really the morphing into the butterfly, right? The morphing into the being that is free to spread its wings and do what it intended to do. And this is the moment. We have an energy window. That energy window might close in the next months, might close in the next year. I'm not certain, but it is still here. And these dark forces are doing everything to shut it, to close it. We have to use this energy window. I'm not saying that beyond that, when it closes, you can't change things. It's just incredibly much more difficult, if that is a sentence, incredibly much more difficult. Jesus. It is just very, it takes a lot more energy. And it might take another century or 2 or 3 to create such an energy window again where monumental shifts for the good can happen. Please don't rely on any story or fairy tale that tells you that these things are already being done on your behalf and that you just need to watch the show and eat the popcorn. Those are psychological operations. They're very sophisticated and they hold a level of truth. They have to, because that's the thing that you resonate with. You have a being, and if that being is solely beamed, if they only beam lies at you, you can feel it. But if they beam enough truth at you, sort of wrapped in lies, then you resonate with those truths, and that's what ignites your spirit. But then the lies are really what keeps you sort of the hopium thing, right? And I'm saying you are it. You always have been it. These 5% roughly are it. We can do this. We have everything that we need. We don't need anything else. We've been born with it. And if we activate that, we can accomplish more in the next 5 years than we have in the last 5,000 maybe. That's sort of that's just an assumption, but it might be true. So, all right, my friends, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining us for this Sunday sermon. As I said, I call it jokingly. If you want to, and if you're interested in this, we do an audio version of this, sort of the old school radio version in the Inspired community on Locals. If you go to inspired.locals.com, if you become a supporter, it's $7 a month or $70 a year at a discounted price. We do a lot of shows there, live streams, a lot of interaction with our audience. It's a much more intimate and personal experience, and we love it very much, and we're very thankful for everyone who's joining us there, and of course here as well. Thank you so much again for tuning in. We love you, we appreciate you, and we will be back with you again very, very soon. Must be something in the water or something in the air. I can feel it getting stronger. The sounds are all there. It's written in the stars. It's printed in the sand. It's a whisper getting louder, a whisper in the wind. It's time to be free. It's time to be free from the west, from the south to the north, there's a beautiful awakening. It's time to be free. I can see it in the faces of strangers walking by. Not a word that is spoken, just a spark in their eye. A spark that lights a fire deep down in their soul. Ain't nothing that can stop it once that wave starts to roll. It's time to be free. It's time to be free. From the east to the west, from the south to the north, there's a beautiful awakening. It's time to be free. It's time to be free. From the east to the west, from the south to the north, everybody sing with me. It's time to be free. It's time to be free. From the east to the west, from the south to the north, there's a beautiful awakening. It's time to be free. It's time to be free. From the east to the west, from the south to the north, there's a beautiful awakening. It's time to be free. It's time to be free. It's time to be free.